No.
The original title of this talk was DigiLite What's Next? Quick answer to that is probably not a lot in its present form. Taking it in from a PVR 150 and eventually transmitting it, probably not much further we can go with. Certainly worthwhile developing that. The push these days seems to be to get rid of the PC. That's always been the bugbear. You've got your DigiLite, but you always need a PC of some sort to run it. So all sorts of little single board computers coming out these days. Raspberry Pi, probably the most well-known one. MK808, which we've seen some development on. 802, Beagleboards, Leopards, Odroid. I don't know too much about the last three, but they all seem to be based on Linux with ARM CPUs, advanced RISC machines. So they're pretty powerful things, and with the multi-cores, they get even more powerful. We've seen this one last time, the M0DTS development with the MK808. So that's a PVR USB without its case. So that's a very nice self-contained unit, and I use one of those at the local club, and quite a few people have those. So that's sort of got away from the computer, but it's made it a lot smaller. You don't need a laptop, or you're not tied to a base station. Just remind ourselves about the steps that we do in DATV transmission. We start off with getting in the video in some way. So that would be PVR 150, ordinary camera, PVR 150, which does the compression for you. Convert it to a transport stream with DigiLite transmit. Do that stage as well. Apply all the DVBS, error correction FECs, etc. Split it into the INQ streams, filter, as on the DigiLite, there's those two LC filter banks, modulator and amplifier. And this stage here these can be separate, or they could all be in a webcam, or there's various ways of splitting this. You've probably seen on the forum from F5OEO, he's been working with the Raspberry Pi using its own internal camera, or its add-on camera. At a DATV transmission. So with the Raspberry Pi you can do the standard, attach the so the PVR USB, go into the Raspberry Pi, do some conversion on there for the transport stream, and out the standard way on USB for the DigiLite. Or you could use a webcam into the Raspberry Pi via USB, and then another option is to go out over Wi-Fi into the Windows PC with DigiLite Transmit UDP. So effectively there you've split at that point into two systems which are connected by Wi-Fi. So that can be quite handy. You could have the camera in your shack in the shed, and DigiLite transmit up in the loft by the antenna. One of special interest is using the Raspberry Pi's own camera. That goes straight into the graphics processor. So there's no huge amount of USB data to move around. Convert to transport stream there. And this is a novelty of F5OEO. He's actually producing the I and the Q bits directly out of the Raspberry Pi, which means on the DigiLite you don't need a USB module, and you don't need the DS PIC either. You're just using the DigiLite as a pure modulator. And you can mix and match all these. You can go in various ways and come out in various ways. So you could go in like that and come out like that, or whichever setup you particularly wanted. So quickly the Raspberry Pi. Probably, I don't know how many have been sold now, but it must be a very large number. So it's a low cost, a lot of them around. The real benefit is the hardware H.264 compression. You can do that on PCs, but you need a fairly hefty one. It takes a lot of processing power. So actually having it done in hardware for you is a real benefit. And the camera connects directly, and they've just brought out the Rev B Plus, which has more I/O on the connector and the USB ports. Disadvantages: it's not really the quickest one, and there's no audio, which is of interest to us. Just a note on the H.264 terminology. It's also better known as MPEG-4 Part 10 or AVC. They all really mean the same thing. It does mean you need an HD receiver. If you try to receive H.264 on an SD receiver, it will say there's a signal there, but you just won't get any video out of it. So with F5OEO, one of his standard developments, we're going in with the Raspberry Pi camera, which has that resolution. You don't need to use that resolution. You can pick off any resolution you want, but it's far more than we need at the moment. Then the software that F5OEO has produced, Raspberry Vid is the Raspberry Pi software for taking interfacing to the camera and producing video. FFmpeg is a free utility, does all sorts of conversion and packing of data and formatting. We then do all the DVBS bits for our FEC, etc. Then another F5OEO program is where you actually sent it out on the USB port to the DigiLite. So fairly simple with the DigiLite and the Raspberry Pi and its camera. We can now do full screen HD in the same bandwidth that we're using on 23 SEMS. Again, you do need an HD receiver though. Another of his developments, he's doing much the same, except he's using the PWM outputs on the Raspberry Pi to produce the I and the Q directly. As we saw before, that can go straight into a modulator and cut out quite a bit of equipment on the DigiLite board itself. Slight problem on the B is that you can't get at the second PWM output very easily. You have to do a bit of soldering. On the B Plus, with that extended connector, you can now get at the second PWM. So that's not a problem. That's the high quality end. We're seeing we can do HD now, full screen HD, 1920 by 1080 in 4 megasymbols, and it does look very good. But H.264, better compression ratio. They say 2 times as good as MPEG-2. I just said it was a lot better, but we've got some demo videos in a moment. We'll see for ourselves. But it does look seem a lot better than MPEG-2. Drawbacks of going to narrow bandwidth is that motion starts to be affected. Again, it's all trade-offs. You've got to trade off: do you want quality, do you want motion, or do you want a balance in the middle? For us, I imagine it's mostly talking head shack shots. So just you can pick and choose. You can trade them off yourselves and say, well, I want this resolution but this lower symbol rate, or lower the resolution up to symbol rate. Bandwidth of QPSK, that's my rule of thumb. It's the filter roll-off is supposed to be 0.35, so you multiply the symbol rate by 1.35 and that gives you your bandwidth. So technically your 4 megasymbols is 5.4 megahertz wide when it's 60 dB down, but it comes down quite quickly, so it's well down before then. So looking at narrow bandwidths, If we want 1 megasymbols, we're down to 1.35 meg bandwidth. But let's start looking at really low symbol rates now. 333K will fit in half a meg. That was a figure mentioned in relation to the extra meg we might get at 146, 147. So that would certainly fit in there. Audio, we have to be careful with audio now. With these low bit rates, DigiLite is using that, which is probably half the video, a large factor of the video bandwidth at these low symbol rates. So do we leave the audio out, or do we try and compress the audio even more? It's unfortunate that the satellite receivers they can't just handle very simple telephone style sampled audio, just 8 bits per sample. They really do want it compressed, even though it's not really much of an advantage when you get down to low bit rates. So MP2 is probably about the lowest, has the lowest CPU overhead for compression anyway, and it will go down to 32k bits per second, so that's getting a bit more reasonable now than 192. But you can leave it out altogether. DigiLite 2.5 has an option not to send the audio, so you can devote the whole bandwidth to video. Problems going to low symbol rates with domestic receivers. Some of them don't go below 2 megasymbols. Quite a few go down to 1, but I haven't seen a domestic one that goes below 1 megasymbol. So we have to think about different ways of receiving it. And also with narrow, low symbol rates, noise problems increase. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think it's to do with the way the phase noise tails off from the carrier. It's quite high close in. As you get further away, it tails off. But we're now working close in to the nearer the carrier than we were before. We're not 4 meg away. We're a few hundred K away. Here's where it might be useful to go to a low bandwidth, apart from the fact that spectrum's always under pressure. This is presumably a well-known radar establishment in the northeast of England, and they seem to be putting out carriers on every megahertz. Apparently they don't dance around, as far as I understand it. So there's a nice little half meg gap there on about 437.45 megahertz. So apparently 2 megasymbols, you might as well forget it, because something's going to get you. But going down to about 432, you'll be very popular. But there's a nice little gap there you might be able to fit into. That's assuming they don't change, of course. Right.
You can see the chunks of spectrum. It's quite interesting. It's very simple.
It does stay still, does it? It doesn't.
It's difficult to tell sometimes whether it's propagation that's changing, that's bringing up some segments that are moving down.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly the segments that are occupied seem to remain fairly static.
Right.
It doesn't stay still.
It doesn't. No. In fact, when I used to live up in the north, if you used to listen to the pulses, you'd hear them, presumably if they were tracking objects, you'd hear them start the pattern change to the pulse rate.
We're talking about low symbol rates. What's it look like? I mean, can you move? Do you have to say gottle gear, CQ, CQ, or can you actually talk and wave your hands around and show things? So I've made a number of if I can find them. On the desktop, were they?
Sorry. Should have given me warning. Lunchtime. Looking for.
Some files went onto the desktop in a folder. There's the ones. Thanks. Yep. Right, so if we start off at the top, So this is 4 megasymbols, 1920, that should be by 1080, not 1280, standard HD. So that's the sort of resolution you're going to get. Best seeing it on an LCD screen, of course. In fact, this is 1024 by 768, I think, the projector, so you're not getting the full benefit anyway. I'm now doing some bit of waving around. And the oh, very handy with. And also I do. Also CQ contest. Yeah.
17.
Correct. What's it? 1 point per metre. Was it?
Get rid of that cursor.
Oops. Get rid of the whole lot again. Yeah. Play again. Hang on.
Just close it. You want to play it again?
There we go. Right. Because you don't really get the benefit of it, I've got this on the on this pad, so I'll pass this around so you can have a look at it. The pad's only that's only 1024 by 600, I think, so you're not getting the full benefit on this, but you can see, get an idea of what the quality's like. So let's try a different resolution. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Your eyes aren't good enough now to see all this stuff. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got the wrong glasses, I can't see whether we're. Right. So two megasymbols. This is what we could use on 70sems. It's now into 4:3 format, 720 by 576 standard broadcast SD definition. So still looking pretty reasonable. There's quite a bit of brightness bouncing there. I think that's the Pi camera. There's all sorts of settings on the Pi camera I haven't investigated yet, but it does seem to be a bit sensitive to brightness levels. There we are, more points on 70sems, double points, that's at 5 now. So, and the motion, of course, is okay. There's no problem with that. Right, let's go. How do I turn around? So, so 333K symbols now. So this will fit nicely into half a mega bandwidth. So it looks fairly reasonable. But start moving around and it starts falling to bits a bit. And you can see it's having slight trouble digitizing in the background. This room really isn't bright enough. This pulsing effect goes away if it's brighter, but you still get a bit of it. That's to do with the GOP structure of the way MPEG compression works. You start off with a whole frame and lots of little increments, then you do the whole frame again. That's known as the GOP, the group of pictures, and that's over, I think it's 12 or 15, I think, in DigiLite. So it's about half or every 3/4 of a second it sends a full frame again. And when it sends a full frame, it must be digitizing it slightly differently every time. So talking heads would be fine. Lamps coming through well, and you see the second hand, but if you wanted to move around a lot, you wouldn't really want to be at that resolution. So let's change the screen resolution. This is all H.264, yeah. This is all H.264, 25 frames a second. These are recorded at the point at where they would go into DigiLite UDP just for convenience, but they're of the right bit rate for the symbol rate at 3.4. So let's drop the screen resolution, see what happens. Right, so 333K symbols now we're at 352 by 288 pixels. That's half normal broadcast, horizontal and vertical. So you can see the resolution. It's not quite as sharp, but it's not falling to bits now when you move around. So a bit more acceptable. If you wanted movement rather than fidelity, then you go for that. Okay, when you get to about a quarter of the screen being taken up by the mouse mat, then you can see the figures on the handwritten figures tend to start breaking up. There's plenty of tinkering you can do with the resolutions. Maybe you could drop that to 320 by 240, quarter VGA resolution. That'd give you about a third more bandwidth and wouldn't affect the quality too much, but it does depend on what we want to get out of this. Right, next one. So, 128K symbols now, getting really low. So this will fit into maybe 180 kilohertz. So we can now apply for an allocation on top band.
Yes.
Good. But you can see it's really struggling. Now this is 720 by 576 again, back to standard H broadcast resolution. As soon as you move, it's struggling to do the full frame at the start of every GOP. And if you move at all, it just disintegrates into a complete mess. So you wouldn't want to be using that at all. Enter a contest with that, and sorry.
That can still work.
Yes, you can still see the contest sheet. So there we are. More points, yeah.
Contact. But you had lads like that, you know. Yeah.
So let's drop the resolution. So we'll stay at 128K symbols. And good lighting as well, particularly with the Pi camera. It takes out a lot of this. See in the far right-hand corner, it's furring a lot worse than it is in the left one, which is the lights are sort of behind where I am at the moment. So let's drop the resolution to 352 by 288, still 128K symbols. Still quite a bit of breakup. Not quite as bad as 720 by 576. So. Rule of thumb, it's about 1.5 times the symbol rate, so 180, 1.35 to be precise, but and you can still make contacts with it.
$6 meters in Australia, you'd be chuffed, wouldn't you? If you could see a VK like that. Yes.
Right. This is the entrant for how low can you go on the resolution. I didn't put the on the wall because I couldn't read it.
So what is this?
This is 128K symbols again. This is 128 by 92 pixels. I'll try that again. So a short one, that. But as you can see, if you caught it at the end, you can still make contacts with it. Well, that's the next question. Exactly. Good question.
Our contest organisers just asked the question.
But it is from a distance. It is vision, and it is moving a bit. So, but again, you can still make contacts with it. So that's the question we have to ask. What do we want out of this? When does it stop becoming television? When does it stop becoming DATV? What do we want? Is there a minimum quality, a minimum motion that's acceptable, or what do we want to do? If you're showing a project, it's not much point doing it at 128 by 92 because you want each pixel will be a surface mount resistor. It wouldn't be very good at all. So that's the sort of just a brief outline of the sort of quality you can get. We've seen the high end, but you can go down to very narrow bandwidths. Could you make that 128K even smaller, perhaps? If you kept very still, you could maybe go back to 352 by 288, or just mix and match.
When does it become slow scan?
Exactly, yes. I think my candidate for a half meg would be the what's this one? Drop the resolution slightly. Don't move around too much, and I think that'll be fairly acceptable. But again, it depends what you want. If you want high quality, then you can forget all these low symbol rates.
You can get that in half a meg.
That's right, yeah. 333 by 1.35 is less than half a meg.
Maybe a bit of space for some audio or something.
Yeah. 32K bits of audio won't impact the video very much.
What was the issue of double chip text?
You could combine it with RTTY and sort of type and have a ticker running.
We just
Down at a low bit rates, though, you're really into sort of video conferencing territory. So
Yeah.
that's the use there, aren't you?
Yeah, you can certainly communicate with it. It depends, is it good enough for what you want to communicate with?